Hello everyone, Mr. Stevens here again. Today's lesson is going to be about the circumference of circles. Now, what we're going to be looking at here is how to calculate the circumference of circles and sectors. And the important thing to note at this point is that circumference is basically a fancy word for perimeter, but specifically applied to circles. So let's just remind ourselves of a few of the different features of a circle. We're going to be using these words a little bit over the next few lessons. So diameter is the distance from one side of the circle to the other through the middle. And you can see it here in the diagram. From one side of the circle. Okay, the radius is the distance from the middle to the edge. Also known as half the diameter. A sector is a portion of the circle or a slice of the circle. Think of a slice of a cake or a slice of a pizza when you're thinking of a sector. And then the circumference, as I already mentioned, is the perimeter of the circle, or the distance all the way around the edge of the circle. These are two special kinds of sectors: half of a circle, otherwise known as a semicircle, or a quarter of a circle, also known as a quadrant. These words will come up a little bit in the questions that you're doing and potentially going forward in some more lessons this unit. So this is the important part of today's lesson. This is the formula that we're going to be using to calculate the circumference of a circle. We have this little symbol here that you may not have seen before. If you don't remember what it is, let me remind you. We call that symbol pi. It's a Greek letter, and it has a number value associated to it, which is approximately 3.14. You can also approximate it as 22/7. It has an exact value that has an infinite number of decimal places. These numbers after the decimal point keep going on forever. Your calculator has as close as possible exact value of pi in it. And on most calculators, that is located by pressing Shift and the EXP button down the bottom. On my calculator, it's on the bottom row in the middle, but you have to press Shift first. And to calculate the circumference of a circle, we take that number pi and we multiply it by either the diameter, or if we only have the radius, we can multiply the radius by 2, which is the same as saying the diameter. Because the radius, remember, back up here, is half the diameter. So if we times the radius by 2, what we actually have is the diameter. Okay, so let's do a couple of examples of actually calculating the circumference of the circle. In this case, we have the radius, so our formula is going to be pi times 2r, which equals pi times 6, because our radius here is 3. So I'm going to use my calculator now to do 6 times pi, and the answer I get is 18 point. And we'll round that off to 2 decimal places. Okay, I want to give you guys a tip here. When we're doing these kinds of questions and you're putting them in your calculator, especially when we're working with pi, the answer that you're going to get is going to be full of long decimal places. And it's very good practice to get into to write your answers down exactly like this. Write down all the decimal points that your calculator gives you and then round it off to 2 decimal places. In this case, we're told to round it off to 2 decimal places, so I've rounded off to 2 decimal places. If you're not told to round it off at all, I think 2 decimal places is a good option to always default to. Write down the full answer and then write it down in just 2 decimal places. Okay, and another calculation, this time working with a diameter. So we're just going to do pi times d, which is pi times 12. Straight in the calculator. And the answer is 37.69911184. And then again, we're rounding it off to 2 decimal places. Alright, now, what do we do when we only have a portion of the circle? Now, in this case, we still need to calculate the circumference, but remember the circumference that we're calculating is going to be this whole distance. Sorry, that's not a very straight circle there. So what we want only half of that distance. So what we're going to do is we're going to calculate the circumference, pi times the diameter, which is pi times 10, which is going to be 31.4159264. And I'm not going to round that off just yet. I'm going to leave that number in my calculator and I'm going to calculate what half of C is by timesing this by a half. And now I can write down the answer my calculator gives me, and then I can round it off to 2 decimal places. So what we've calculated here is half of the circumference, or just this distance here. And now to calculate the perimeter, we're not finished yet because we only know the distance of the curved line. We have to also account for this 10 centimeters. So to find the perimeter, we just add those two numbers together. Okay, and again, today for your practice, your independent work, you're going to be going to page 289, and again, you're going to be answering question 5 to question 8. Thanks, guys.